Okay, so the techniques we've learned up until this point have mostly been for the flash tattoo style, but for the other style, such as the botanical illustration or scientific illustrations, I'm going to teach you a couple different techniques that work well for those. So, say for this flower right here, do you see how it blends from orange to yellow? And you can do that using the spit shading method that we learned, but you can also have a less controlled approach. If you feel like you're so frustrated with all of this and you can't get it to blend smoothly, you might just want to let nature do its thing. So this is called a controlled wet on wet approach. And I'm just going to take plain water and paint in my leaf. So before this video, you should have drawn a couple leaves on a piece of watercolor paper. And being very careful along the edge, I'm just painting in some water. And as you can see, I'm turning my paper as usual. So I'm getting the tip of my brush on the edges here. And I'm just painting a little puddle of water. And again, you're going to have to experiment with what's the right amount of water. There's nothing I can tell you to help you know. You're just going to have to try it and see. Okay, and then I'm going to paint into that. Say I want my leaf to just fade from green to yellow. So I'm going to use up this green I have mixed. And I'm going to paint green straight into that water. Okay, and I really want a more concentrated green. To get concentrated colors, you need less water, more pigment. So see, I have barely any water in here, but I'm really swirling the pigment. Okay, it's probably going to be too much blue. Okay, so I have a more concentrated green now. And it looks really bad right now. The texture of the paper is showing a lot. It doesn't show up when it dries. It looks better when it dries, okay? And then say I want it to fade into yellow. I'm just going to paint the yellow into this side. And because there's water on the paper already, I'm just going to kind of mix them together a little bit in the middle. Okay? I could even add a third color if I wanted, maybe just a tinge of orange toward the end here. Now, that pigment didn't move much. I had to kind of do more with my brush. But that's one controlled approach. I painted it all with water, and then the blending was quite easy because there was already water all over it. And like I said, it's going to look cooler when it dries. So at this point, you just leave it and let it do its thing. And you'll be surprised when it dries, all this weird paper texture will go away and it'll look really cool. Unless you want to do an added step of adding salt. If you are not mature with the salt, Mr. Carr is not going to let you use it anymore. So this is going to be kept at Mr. Carr's desk, okay? And if certain people and certain classes can't handle it, then he can just take it away completely, okay? But what the salt does is, if it's still wet, you have to put this on while it's still wet, you can sprinkle a little bit on, and you don't really know what it does until it dries. So you just gotta let it dry and then see what it does. When it's dry completely, as in like the next day, you can rub the salt off. It'll leave little textures. Okay, I'm gonna show a wetter wet on wet approach. So say, because that wasn't very exciting. It can be a lot more exciting than that. And like I said, I don't really know how to tell you the right amount of water to put down on your paper. You're just going to have to experiment. So I'm being really careful around my edges. It doesn't look like it because I'm hurrying for you guys, but I'm also skilled. So I'm careful around my edges and then just building up a puddle of water. And I want it to be a little more wet this time, so I'm going to add a little bit more water in there. But because you're careful around your edges, it will stay controlled in this little designated area. doesn't move to areas where you didn't paint it. Okay, so now I'm going to work on that. Okay, see how much more the paint spreads? That's because I have a lot more water on there. So you can, this is just more of a dabbing approach. Please don't be doing that stupid dance move just because I said the word dab. Now you're all doing it. But I'm just dabbing a little pigment on here, and the water kind of does the work for me. See how cool that looks? It's like, psh. And so this is where you let the watercolor do the work, okay? You don't move it around anymore. You let the water do its work, okay? All I'm going to do is dab some pigment on here and there, and the colors will blend themselves. They'll do their own thing. Maybe I'll do a little green on this side. So all I have to do is dab pigment on and let the water, let it spread where it wants to go. I'm going to keep working with this orange so you can see, because you can see it the best. Okay, and don't overdo it. Like I said, kids tend to overwork it. Let the watercolor do its magic. At this point, I'm going to stop, walk away, and you're going to let it dry, probably till the very next day. Okay, and let it do its magic. Let it do the work. Okay, watercolor doesn't look good when it's overworked. Okay, if you have big puddles, say you went overboard with the water, you can do this little trick. Just grab a dry point of your paper towel and just dab, and it will pick up the little puddle. Okay, so if you have an insane amount of water there, it's just a little out of control, you can pick up a little bit with your paper towel. Okay, and that is called wet on wet.